Fathers by Roland H. Bainton, Chapter 15. Reformers reformed. Soon they were driven out of the churches and had to meet in fields and forests. Later in Holland, they met for worship in boats, as this old picture shows them. On shore are the churches from which they had been driven out. In the stern of the boat, some people are reading from the Bible. At the bow, others are talking and pointing, probably to conceal what the rest are doing. Yeah, even in Iran, they have provisions for new so-called religions to show up to the local authorities and make sure their rights are upheld. But Christendom was not so about preserving the rights of minorities. One may doubt whether the Anabaptists would have been so hated, feared, and maltreated if they had done nothing more than refuse to baptize babies. They went further and separated church and state. What did Christianity in the Bible times have to do with the state, they asked. Of course, nothing, answered the other side. But things are different now. The state has become Christian. Has it indeed? Said the Anabaptist. Are all the officers really Christian? Are all the people in Zurich really Christian? Are even all the church members Christian? They are not. The true followers of Christ are few. Well, I would see that's where it became people of a different church. They're not really Christian. They're not really, but there's a difference between following and worshiping Jesus, isn't there? Are fanatically claiming and not really trying to adhere to too many teachings. But there's a difference between the teachings of Paul and Jesus too. But they alone ought to be the church. The state, however, does and should include everybody. In that case, the church and the state cannot be one. But why do you say that the church is not Christian? The other side asked. Because, for one reason, the state goes to war. They answered. Well, it's that stuff about killing people who doesn't take Jesus as a Lord and restoring the death penalties of the Bible and that sort of thing. Restoring every bit of the law. Well, if you're going to hold the rest, the so-called Old Testament as authoritative, there's a law that's going to be allowed, right? They answered, whereas Jesus told us to love our enemies, also because the state calls upon us to swear, while Jesus said, swear not at all. Swearing, as they used the word, meant supporting a statement by an oath, which gave God leave to do something dreadful if it were a lie. Jesus said a plain yes or no ought to be enough. Because of these teachings about baptism, the separation of church and state, war, and the oath, the Anabaptists were punished under the old law of Justinian, which put to death the Donatists for repeating baptism. Often it was just the repeating of the being born again wasn't necessarily that you had to be rebaptized, but so over time the Baptist said, well, if you've already been baptized, Protestant and Catholic alike turned against the Anabaptists. In Protestant lands, they were drowned. In Catholic lands, they were sometimes drowned, sometimes burned. Such punishments did not crush, but scattered the movement. One branch of the Hutterites, after many and long wanderings in Europe, found home in the United States and in Canada. Another group sprang up in the Netherlands. They came to be known as Mennonites. For a time, they were severely treated in Holland. Spain was ruling the country at the time, and Spain was savagely Catholic. We have the account of the trial in Holland of a young Mennonite woman named Elizabeth. Here is a part of the record. And to this day, being killed for not being Christian or being supposedly the wrong type of Christian is the number one reason for so-called religious-based murders. Most of them are in that category, a good 90-something% of them, to this very day. On the 15th of January, in the year 1549, Elizabeth was taken. The examiner asked her on oath if she had a husband. She answered, "I cannot take an oath. All I can say is yes and no. What persons have you taught? I cannot tell you. I will confess my faith. We will torture you. I hope that with God's help, I shall keep my tongue and not be a traitor. What do you think of the most holy sacrament?" I have never in my life read in the Bible of a most holy sacrament. I have read only of the Lord's Supper, which plenty of Mithric groups had the same thing. Why have you been baptized again? I haven't been baptized again. I have simply been baptized. Do you think baptism saves you? No, all the waters in the sea cannot save us. Christ saves us. Then they tortured her with thumbscrews till blood gushed from her nails, and she fainted. Coming to herself, she would not give in. Then she was sentenced in the year 1549, on the 27th of March, to be put to death by drowning. The sufferings of the Anabaptists were not without fruit. The Dutch came to see that they were good folk, and when Holland gained independence from Spain, the Mennonites were permitted their own worship. They have many churches in Holland today. In the United States, the Mennonites are strong in Pennsylvania and India. Now, most groups actually have baptism, technically every Friday, and after the ritual washings indicated in the Bible and other spiritual texts, it isn't. But as far as the initial initiation, that you've testified to your faith and formally joined, yeah. But most groups, it's done on a private basis. Some of the Jews have said, well, particularly the women are watched by the rabbi. But again, usually the Jews, as long as it's done, we trust you to give yourself a full bath.